I'm Tony Hawk, and I'm a professional skateboarder.
All right, here we go. Another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne. It's my job to unpack the stories and mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game personally and professionally. And do we ever have one of those individuals on the show today? Please enjoy my conversation with Tony Hawk. That's the title. I'm going to push you on this one. Like, if you had to go deeper, like what makes Tony Tony? What are those qualities, those characteristics that, and these evolve obviously as we go through life and so forth, but as of today, like what do you identify with most?
Well, I think, just in terms of how I made it this far, my determination and perseverance, especially doing an activity, a sport that was widely disregarded for a long time. So I learned the value of never giving up. I think that firstly, but these days I'm more of an advocate for skating and skate parks, as opposed to just being a pro, an active professional athlete. I still like to pride myself in that because I'm too stubborn to let it go. But that's kind of what I do. I try to be an ambassador of sorts for skateboarding and skateboard culture and representation, inclusivity, and skate parks facilities.
Yeah. So important. I mean, I grew up skateboarding, I'd say in my high school years. And those are some of my fondest memories of just, going for me, it was street skating. It would have been during the time when things were really starting to pick up again. And just, finding those locations, meeting your buddies, like at that time too, trying to get home before, the sun, disappeared essentially and make it back, and just pushing so damn hard. I'm goofy, so on my left foot to get home. There's such fond memories of just great people, and to your point, like determination to, like, how many times you do a trick, right? Over and over and over again, and that satisfaction of
I think that, but I also think that approach to life or challenges carries you through. Especially into your adult years, even if you don't skate anymore, I think that is ingrained in you through skating, and the ethos of that, and the whole DIY attitude, or and the renegade aspect of like going to places that you're not supposed to go skate because there were no places to skate. But I think that there's definitely a faction of people these days that grew up with that attitude and with that approach through skating, and they very much rely on it and are proud of it. And you can see it. I mean, it's funny. I'm in my 50s, and when I'm out and about, out in the wild, I can see the older skaters in the crowd. They just have a different vibe.
Well, how so? What do you pick up on?
I think there's sort of a look for sure. There's sort of a, you can tell by shoes almost right
exactly.
away. But also a look, and then just sort of an ease and a self-confidence that that it's hard for people to project. But as a skater, you kind of have been through the fire of probably bullying, not fitting in, not being accepted, and you just forge ahead.
Yeah. Why do you skate today?
It's my meditation. That's really the thing that gives me the most peace and keeps me grounded. And it's the great humbling aspect of what I do, for sure, because skating is not, it doesn't get easier. You can get more confident with it. You can get more consistent with it, but to keep pushing it and to learn new techniques is never easy. And especially as you get older, you discover that very quickly, in the most harsh sense. But when I do go skate, I mean, like yesterday, I spent I spent 2 hours yesterday trying to get one trick on video, and it didn't work out. And I'm just glad I got out there and skated.
Yeah.
And, I would say 20 years ago, that would have been a crushing day. Like I would have been, I couldn't get over it. And now I just feel like, well, I got out there, I tried, I got to work out. And I felt like I was pushing myself, and I didn't need the great end or the great success to feel good about it.
That's interesting. I mean, do you think that's just from experience, and I almost want to say like a sense of gratitude to the fact that, you can still go out there and skate for 2 hours and try a trick like that and come back in one piece essentially? Like, what do you think flipped in your mind over the years to just kind of be with the lifestyle and the sport?
I spent so much of my life trying to prove myself in the skate world, and always coming up with new challenges and always striving for some newer height, and just kind of like endlessly chasing this carrot.
Yeah.
And at some point, especially in recent years, I realized that I can be just as effective just being part of the scene, and enjoy that like in a way that I didn't before. Enjoy it more from an outsider perspective, where this is amazing. Like you said, I'm in shape enough to be able to do that for 2 hours and try something new and be considered part of the scene, part of the thread, the fabric, and be relevant, and that's enough. I mean, I definitely, my wife has helped me through that quite a bit in terms of just realizing that if I'm just supporting the scene, that should be enough.
Well, so that leads really well into something I wanted to talk to you about, because I have to say, I've been quite fortunate. I'm super grateful to have been in the position to interview, at this point, probably 300 plus people over the last 5 years. But in doing the preparation, and I've done some pre-interviews with some ex-pro skaters and so forth to get some different context, my barber being one of them, actually. There's something different when I say your name to anyone. I mean, and I'm talking about nephews and cousins, to moms, to people that skate today, that people have never picked up a board. There's just this level of excitement, and I'd say that the foundational quality that I'm picking up on is respect. Like
Wow.
it's just this. Oh man, well, I'll never forget. I was sitting in the barbershop interviewing the guy's name's Dave Nolan. He was pro skater street in I think in the 90s and so forth. And I was asking him, because we were talking about the 90s, which I'd love to talk to you about a little bit later, and how, when things were all just essentially crashing. I said, what? Or I asked him, I said, what did Tony mean for you in that era, in that time? And I mean, I'm going to get a bit emotional thinking about it, because there was emotion right there in the room. There was a long pause, and he said, he was there with us. He was there and when you said, being a part of the fabric and the scene, like he was there while we were going down, and just knowing that he was there, and relying on the fact that, I know you've seen this happen before and you're in it for the long haul, but just knowing that, like, yeah, you were doing other things just to keep it going, but he was there. And I feel like that just sets up this, I don't know even how to define it or describe it, but you have this level of respect worldwide from so many people, that I have to ask you, like, who do you respect growing up, or who instilled that value into you?
Well, I'd say my first mentor in that sense was Stacy Peralta, because he's the one who formed our team in the early 80s, the Bones Brigade. Yeah. And he did it not just based on skill sets, but also he could just sense a deeper, I don't know how to explain it. I think he could sense a deeper passion from all of us, that we were not going to rest on our accolades, that we were in it for the long haul, that we chose this as our life. And I mean, let's put it this way. I was put on the Bones Brigade 40 plus years ago. And yesterday I skated with Steve Caballero and Mike McGill. Nice. We're all still skating just as passionately as ever. And that's a testament to not just Stacy, but obviously to the stronghold that skateboarding can have on your life. But to answer your question, that he showed me that it's not just about your skating. It's about it's about giving back to the community. Mm-hmm. It's about fostering the new generation and doing whatever you can. I mean, he was a former pro skater himself. He started a company and did whatever he could to promote skateboarding in general. It wasn't just about promoting his brand, our team. It was like he became the unofficial ambassador for skateboarding through the 80s. And the reason that you saw skateboarding in Back to the Future, do you know what I mean? The reason that we were in Gleaming the Cube was because of Stacy Peralta. So I took a lot of cues from that. And when I found myself in this position where suddenly I realized I have a voice that extends beyond just the skate realm and might transcend skateboard culture, I wanted to use it in the best way possible and to bring everyone along and show why we have been doing this for so many decades, why we have devoted our lives to it, why it's worthy of attention, why it can be one of the most positive activities, outlets for kids.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I mean, I feel like we should set, because this is not, so this is not a skateboarding podcast. So just to set some context for listeners, what happened in the skateboard world? Because there was the 70s, 80s, definitely the 90s, things really, crashed and then came back. And I think a lot of people probably listening, if just judging by the age group, would remember, the X Games and the 900, and then things, took off to another level again. But what, from your perspective, what was going on? Like, why the crashes and the highs and lows and just in an industry like that? You don't see that often.
Yeah, well, I think in the early years, especially the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, skateboarding was considered a fad. So it was very much paralleled with yo-yos or frisbees. It was just kind of like, this is cool for now, and it's a kid's activity, and we move on. But then through the 80s, the whole Dogtown and Z-Boys era was happening, and they were learning how to skate these empty swimming pools, which soon became what we know as vert half pipe riding. And there were aerial maneuvers. So then there was that revolution through the 80s, and then it came back around again more as a fad, more like in the years of Back to the Future and MTV, and then skating was kind of back in the limelight, but it was still considered this sort of this passing fad. And then through I don't know if it was considered that, but what happened was, especially in the late 80s, skate parks closed because all the skate parks were private facilities. They couldn't afford insurance anymore. It's America. There's all this litigation. And
these were the bowls, right? At that time?
This empty swimming pools, bowls, just big concrete playgrounds. Yeah. And people got sue happy and they couldn't afford their liability insurance. And so they all shut down. I mean, some shut down for lack of participation, but most of them just couldn't afford the insurance. And then skating kind of died in the sense of popularity, but then it went through this resurgence that was sort of underground street, literally in the streets.
Yeah.
And kids started to figure out how to use the urban landscape as their skate park. So then they learned how to skate stairs and benches and handrails and find natural contours and curves of buildings. And then it was like, Well, now everything's a skate park.
Yeah.
And skating started to grow again. I mean, that sounds like probably the era that you were into it.
Yeah.
And then in the mid 90s, we got this sort of new chance to show ourselves on television through the X Games. And even though the X Games was sort of a strange mixture of fringe sports, skateboarding definitely stood out and I think rose to the top of the interest where kids are watching it. And then that started to grow. Skating kept evolving. Every year there'd be a whole new set of tricks to learn. And then our video game was released in 1999. And I feel like between that and the X Games popularity, that was sort of the tipping point for this is here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a foundation built that is not going to just die away with popularity or with trends. It was more like we are deep seated now, and it's been like that ever since. I mean, it definitely has waxed and waned a little bit, but we're up here now, and there's a much more international interest. It's in the Olympics now. I mean, it's here to stay.
Yeah. Do you remember? Was there a moment for you when you really felt it? Like, okay, something's changed here in the sense of like it's here to stay. This is not just a smaller group of friends that are really into something. Like globally, people are talking about skateboarding at this point.
Well, I definitely felt that with our video game release because I would hear people talking about skaters and tricks that clearly didn't skate themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that was where I thought, okay, this is something different because it used to be that the only fans of skateboarding were skaters themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly it was fans of skateboarding that don't even try to skate, don't want to try, but really appreciate it because they were introduced to it through either television or through video games. And I mean, it's crazy to think that forgive the term, but like a civilian or a pedestrian knows what a kickflip is. Do you know what I mean? Like that, when kickflips were created in around 1982, 83, there was a very small percentage, like literally hundreds of people that even understood what that was or cared what it was.
Yeah.
And now you can drive by people on a skateboard and say, do a kickflip, and they can probably do it.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like it's gotta be interesting on your side, having been in the, with the sport for so long or the lifestyle or whatever you want to call it. I know it's an art. It's all blended together. I've heard you say, just to see, this evolution and there's got to be a sense of pride there, that you've had a hand in a lot of that as well.
Sure. I mean, if I had anything to do with that, I'm intensely proud, but really I'm just more excited to be living through it because I grew up at a time when I had to hide my skateboard at high school. Like in 9th grade, I had to hide it in the bushes because if I was seen with it on campus, I would get bullied. Mm-hmm. I got bullied anyway, just because I was so small and I looked like a skater. But to have a skateboard just made you extra target. And now that's not the case at all. Sure. And if I had something to do with that by representing skateboarding, hopefully in its best light, then I'm hugely proud. But I'm more just excited to be living in this time where I get to participate and see it grow.
Yeah, it just for context for people as well. I mean, there's hiding the skateboard in the bushes, but there's hiding your skateboard in the bushes, having come back from winning a contest and being literally at the top of your game in the skate world, and then all of a sudden, you're the strange kind of outlier at school. It's crazy.
Oh yeah,
right?
No, I had it. It was my high school years were a crazy paradox.
Yeah.
I would. Well, at some point, I actually ended up moving high schools because I lived right on the sort of border of two different high schools, and I got so harassed at the first one that I actually requested to be transferred. So when I transferred to the other high school, I was more of a ghost. I just kept a low profile. So people knew that a professional skateboarder went to the school, or like that Tony Hawk went to their school, but they couldn't pick me out of the crowd.
Yeah.
And so I would go, especially in my later high school years when things were starting to get more successful, I would go off to Florida, or I would go off to or Canada, or the Northeast, and go to a big competition and win one of those giant checks, like the Happy Gilmore checks, and come back to school and be a total ghost in the hallways. And that was okay with me. I wasn't looking for their acceptance or their accolades. But it was a very strange existence.
It's so strange. How did you? I want to talk a little bit about your mind just through that time, but then also, like coming back to what I was talking to Dave about, when things were crashing in the 90s. Like, how did you get through that mentally? Like what was your self-talk like?
I just hustled. I just did whatever I could to make ends meet. I don't know. I guess I just had this sort of skate ethos, do it yourself attitude for so long that when the excesses started to fall away, it was more like, I just got to go extra hard and figure out how to make a living. I mean, at that point, I had just started a family. I had a young son. I had 2 mortgages, and it was like, I got to figure this out. And so I took
this is quick, right? It's like you're up here getting checks to like almost nothing.
I would say like 1991 to 1992, my income dropped by half every month, because it was all royalty based. So my products were not selling. Skateboard products were not selling. Mine were on the downhill slide significantly. And then I just started to try to, like, I had some experience editing video. I had the equipment to edit video, so I started freelancing video editing. I put my name out there as a consultant for any sort of Hollywood job, commercial, film, otherwise. And I got a couple jobs doing that. It was funny because I was 24 at the time. And so in Hollywood, I was considered too old to be skateboarding or to be shown skateboarding. So I would be the consultant that they would hire to say, okay, what is possible once we find a skateboarder? And then I would go and show them literally the skating thing they wanted. And they go, okay, yeah, that'll work. So we're going to hire some 15-year-old to do that.
Tony Hawk, the consultant.
Oh yeah. That was
the business card.
That was a good gig. I was not complaining.
Okay. That's funny. Talk to me about then. So then things take off though, eventually. Like you said, you talked a little bit about X Games, obviously the video game, the 900 with, the first person to land a 900. That was another big one. And it all of a sudden, from my understanding, just to put the perspective out there, like you're going on tour, selling out arenas and with setups and pyro and all that stuff at that time, rivaling, if not, more elaborate than rock, bands and so forth. Like, how did you keep, I guess, a couple questions. What was that like for you? And how did you keep your ego in check?
Well, it was like, it was definitely like just rock stardom, where we were selling out arenas and we were on tour and on buses and sometimes private jets but we never lost sight of that we had to perform at the highest level every night. So that, I think, because that was so paramount to what we were doing, that kept our egos in check, because it was like, you can't party to excess. You can't take this for granted. You're only as good as tomorrow night's performance. Yeah. And we did. We put it out there every single night. It's crazy to think of the levels of stuff that was going on for 30 to 40 shows in a row. So I guess that's my only answer. But also having lived through the darker times, it was all just sort of, I don't know how to explain it. It was all just, it was surreal, but there was no way that we were going to assume this is what it's going to be like for the rest of our lives. Because we had already lived through,
right?
Yeah, because we had been through the fire. And so there was no way to get ahead of ourselves and take any for granted.
Does that still stay with you today with your businesses? There's Birdhouse and there's other, Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, and also I guess the flip side of that and the sort of the challenges of that is that I did have to struggle for so long and take every opportunity I could. And I kind of lost myself in that. And then when things get big and there's all this huge success, how do you say no?
Yeah.
Because I came from this time when I couldn't afford to say no. And so I would say that's the bigger challenge of having the success. I mean, when people want to see me and maybe pay me for my time, but at the same time, I want to have a healthy family work-life balance.
And
so it's empowering to say no, but it's super hard.
Yeah. Because I know a bit of the backstory with this, and that, obviously that lifestyle and that level of fame. I think I heard you say something to the fact of it's the worst drug out there, that kind of fame.
Yeah. I mean, to a sense, in a sense, obviously there are far more
for sure
lethal and dangerous drugs, but it is in the sense that if you get a taste of it and you are trying to get more of it, well, for one, it may not be available to you, but secondly, you probably end up sort of destroying your integrity along the way if that's all you're after.
Yeah.
And we see it time and time again, especially in the age of social media, where people get a sense of fame and they think that they're invincible.
Mm-hmm. So what would you do now? Like, because I know it affected your relationships, your romantic relationships, but then also, with your kids and so forth as well, because you're away and, doing, different gigs and things like that. I guess what my question is, how would you input the pause? If you had to go back and be like, wait a second, is this really worth it right now? Like, because now obviously in retrospect, it's it's easier to come at this, but I think for many listening that, who knows, maybe you're in that position right now or it's about to happen, and I think it's just good wisdom to soak up from you that, hey, I would have done this a little bit differently, and here's how.
Yeah, I think I would. Well, you can easily lose yourself in the success to the point where you don't even recognize who you are or why you make these choices anymore. And I think that getting caught up in that is the biggest, well, not just warning sign, but a huge mistake, because you definitely will lose your sense of values, maybe the people you hold dearest. And there's no good outcome from that. I think that's what it is. I just kept chasing all these things, and at some point it was like, what is this all for? What is the end goal here? There wasn't one, except for to just keep the machine moving. And that in and of itself is maybe one of the biggest mistakes. I mean, I thought I had to do all these red carpet events and interviews to stay in the, to stay visible and to stay in the limelight. And then for what?
Yeah.
And at some point I took more agency over my time and my choices, and realized that I can be just as effective, through my own outlets. And it's way more gratifying and validating to be doing it this way, obviously. And I just have a better sense of what resonates too. You know what I mean? Not just jumping on some new hot whatever trend or show or pop culture thing. It's just more like I've sort of found, I guess, my lane, so to speak, even though I don't really like that terminology, because I feel like you should always be open to new influences and new direction. But mine is completely centered in skateboarding.
Yeah, what I think, like, if I can reflect back, I mean, what I pick up on is of course, there's been hiccups along the way. When you're a human, surprise, surprise, everyone. There's stuff that happens, but I think overall, it seems like you've always been in this for the longevity of skateboarding. Like even when you turned pro, like that at that time, didn't just for people listening, that's just checking a different box essentially on a piece of paper. It's not pro as of today, right? So you have to be in it for the actual sport to continue, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, not, but I, I don't expect everyone to be skating for the good of the many.
Sure. Okay.
People skate because of what it brings to them mentally,
Yeah.
physically, their friend group, their sense of values. So I respect all that. I think I just found myself in this position where there was a big audience listening to me beyond just the skate centric audience.
Mhm.
And I found myself with a sense of responsibility to that, and that I should represent skateboarding as best I can. And why? For what it brought to me. So yeah, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And I had to grow into it. Like I was a shy kid. I wasn't trying to be famous. There was no fame or fortune in skateboarding when I started. But then suddenly when it fell upon me, I had to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah. So how did you reset? Who helped, or what helped you pop out of that cycle and kind of pull out of the machine of it and recalibrate?
Um, well, definitely my wife. And I think just in terms of getting older and sort of staying stuck in that cycle of not, I don't want to say rock and roll lifestyle, because we had to perform at high levels, so it wasn't crazy of
Yeah.
you know um substance abuse or anything like that. It was just more the constant chase of the high of whatever it is, of skateboarding, or the travel, or the excesses. And so at some point, um yeah, it's really my wife that was just like, what we gotta we need some balance here. Like we need to be here for our kids,
Mhm.
and have some more, not stability, but more routine. I
Okay.
think that's probably the best answer. Like, as simple as it sounds, being more
Simple works,
domestic.
Tony.
Yeah, but
Simple
being
works.
more domestic, being more routine. Like
Yeah.
I know, just for instance, right now, like my daughter can rely on me to give her all the transportation she needs, Sunday through Wednesday, and going to theater practice and cheer rehearsals and all that stuff. And I was much more in past years sporadic with that stuff,
Okay.
just because I allowed other things to take priority.
Yeah. How's that feel for you now?
Oh, it's fun. I mean, it's exhausting, but it's way more rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. Fair. Fair. Too funny. What do you have any kind of like practices? I know you said, skateboarding is your meditation, but is there any routines, rituals, or anything like that that you use to check in with yourself, as things are going, so that some of the things in the past, like you can hear and see those warning signs if they're creeping too close?
I think more just trying to check in with my kids, because they're mostly grown. We have 5 boys, and they're all either on their own. One's married, and graduated from college, having jobs. 2 are still in college, but just making sure that we're still in touch regularly and checking in on
Yeah.
them, and making sure if they need anything. Um, I'd say that's probably my best answer, because when you, at some point, especially when your kids are out of the house, you tend to be like, all right, they're just on their own. They don't need our constant
Sure.
supervision, but they still need help, and they still need advice.
So that's for you is they're a bit of a temperature check on, because if I'm reading this correctly, they're reflecting back potentially what's going on in your world. Because my question is like,
so.
Right? Go ahead.
Well, I also think that just to keep them updated on what you're doing too, like that's important. Because I don't want them to see me out and I don't know on social media or whatever, and they're like, I didn't know he was doing that. Like that's such an odd. That's an odd existence or communication pattern.
Yeah. Interesting. What do you get from your kids in terms of, emotions, feelings, all that stuff? Like, what do they do for you right now in your life?
Oh, well, they're the most important part of our lives. And so what do I get from them? Motivation, inspiration. We're always fascinated with what they choose to do and how they approach things and their sense of creativity and sense of values. I mean, there was a moment like just last year, my wife and I, we took all the kids to Italy. We had kind of a pretty extravagant vacation. We haven't done that in a while. And
sure.
And at some point we're sitting down to dinner with all of them. And we just kind of looked at each other and like, look, we did it. Like
they're all here.
They're responsible human beings, adults in their own rights. And we're enjoying it.
That's awesome. How do you think, cause you're in the, we're all in a certain chapter in our lives, obviously, but I want to kind of ask you about your current chapter and how you think about like where you're at and where you're heading when it comes to almost like transferring wisdom and teaching and whatnot to the upcoming generation of skaters. I know you're, being from Canada over here, I have to definitely shout out Reese, Calgary, 10-year-old, incredible girl skating with you. Like, how do you think about the next chapter of your life? What does that look like?
I don't have any great directive. I'm just kind of taking it day by day. I'm definitely enjoying these times. And I went through this bad injury last year. And I'm still coming out of that for the most part. I mean, I'm pretty much back to the kind of skating that I'd hoped I would be back to, but
the femur.
So what's that? Yeah, I broke my femur last March. And had a failed recovery for the first part of that because I got back to skating too soon because I couldn't stay off it, and it was my fault. But so 8 months into my recovery, I had to have surgery to reset the bone because it never actually healed properly or connected back to itself. So now I'm on the I'm on the better end of that, and I'm able to skate and do most of my old tricks, and so I feel that's exciting to me. I don't know how far I'm taking that, but it's more like I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take it for granted again. I'm not going to take advantage of it or think that I am invincible because I fucked around and found out.
Yeah.
And that taught me a huge lesson. So now I'm just kind of for the skating, like I'm cruising. I'm not cruising, but I'm kind of playing the hits, so to speak. And other than that, doing what I can to advocate for skateboarding and skate parks and whatever that looks like. And that takes different forms every day. It's like doing podcasts, doing interviews, traveling to do talks or panel discussions or trying to to raise awareness for our charity or other charities that involve in skateboarding. I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing. And it's been a blast. Like it's really like to sort of be my own boss and choose my own priorities has been really liberating.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the recovery. I actually had a question from some skaters on this one, like, because there's and this I think applies to any sport or any injury. There's the typical recovery, the physio, all of that kind of stuff, right? Which we're all used to. The question I got from my barber actually is like, I want to know, like, what's the first thing you do when you get back on the board? Like, is he just in the middle of the ramp doing a little shove it and be like, that feels okay, or maybe it doesn't? Because this guy in particular just had a kidney transplant and hasn't been on his board for 3 months is kind of in the same, like can't wait to get back, but is scared, like how do you test the waters out?
No, it was super slow. I took it slow. Well, how do I explain that?
The first time you didn't take it slow.
I took it slow until I didn't.
Yeah.
Like I took it slow and then I thought, well, I've got the general balance. I should probably try to go up this big ramp. And then when I went up the big ramp and got to the top and tried to jump off my board onto the top, I felt my leg literally move out of place. And so
can't feel good.
Yeah. And I think I was in denial of it. I knew something really was bad happened, but I was just in denial of it. And then I just kept forcing through the pain to try to get back to the skating. And at some point I realized I'm not making any progress. I'm always in pain. Something's really off. But to answer his question, when I came back the second time and took it slowly and listened to the medical experts on their advice, that was it. It was just more like I was cruising. I started to learn how to put my weight forward, shift it, because that was the thing, is that in the beginning, I was always 75% on my good leg and 25% on my bad leg. And then when I finally had the confidence to lean on my good leg, then I just started to work my way up. And it was, the recovery by comparison was very slow for me compared to my younger self. Like I broke my pelvis and I was skating 6 weeks later. But these days that recovery comes much slower, and I just embraced that process more and celebrated the small wins. That's my answer. Like there were little tiny things that happened along the way that made, I just got a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like, some are just so nuanced, I can't even explain it, but I just knew that, I had a trouble doing that the other day. Now I can do that easily. It wasn't anything huge or significant, but I celebrated those wins along the way. And that's what got me through it. And now, I did the trick that I broke my leg on, not too long ago.
Shit. How did that feel?
Super scary at first.
Yeah.
And then, like closure, that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Cause I don't know if I'm going to do it again, and I don't care if I do. It was more like I had to overcome that beast.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, I used to skateboard, but I would say my main sport right now is mountain biking. And it's, similar thing. You go down somewhere, and best thing you do is, if you can, get back on the bike and conquer whatever that thing was, the drop, the jump, or whatever. Just mentally, it's so freeing, and like you said, it provides closure.
Yeah, it was mental for sure, but I'd say the physical aspect of it was more difficult to overcome, because my body, like it's changed. And I can't do these sort of grabs and stuff that I used to take for granted. And it takes a lot more effort, a lot more concentration. I have help. I am doing strength and training and stretching. And that was something that I never did, because I just likened that to like jock sports. And I was the, skateboarding was the antithesis of that. But I got to give in at some point. I'm 55. Like I need help.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, how are you adjusting right now with just the way, I know from a trick standpoint, even before the femur, you had mentioned something that you're, focusing a little bit more on technicality versus like massive air and stuff like that. But is there anything with the recent injury that, you're making some small little adjustments so that, again, coming back to that longevity, you can skate as long as your body tells you can?
Oh, for sure. There's, I mean, my focus on tricks is much more technical, low impact. I call them coping dances, just more like grind variations and things. And that provides me the validation that I want, like not from others, but just for myself. I'm super excited that I can still be progressive. Like, I learned a new trick just the other day and got it on video, and it's not going to move the needle for skateboarding. It's not even going to be interesting to some little kid that wants to jump down a big set of stairs, but it's enough for me and it keeps me going. But also I'm working on this video that will be basically my last video part. And it was something that I was working on before I got hurt, not realizing at the time that this would be sort of the last video part. And then as I went through my recovery, I kind of just forgot about it. I chose to forget about it because it just seemed too daunting to get back to. And then when I finally got better and realized like I could revisit this video that I was working on, I leaned into it hard. But as I did, I also realized how exhausting it would be to try to come up with all this new stuff. So at some point, very recently, I realized this is the last time. Like this is the last time I put myself through this to get tricks on video.
Yeah.
And I am winding down here in the next couple of weeks. I mean, I feel like I have the bulk of it. I'm pretty excited about it. There's a few loose ends I want to do, but even that in it of itself, like, what does it mean in the world of skateboarding? I don't know. Some old vert dude's putting out a video part.
Well, what does it mean
but
to
at
you?
the same time, what it means to me is that I overcame the biggest physical challenge in my life. At an age when people definitely thought that I wouldn't be skating or anyone would be skating. So that's enough for me.
There's a line you shared, I can't remember which movie or clip or anything like that. And I have to ask you, you said something, something to the effect of, I didn't know how to like myself. I think this was probably during the time where, the fame was skyrocketing and so forth. Just hearing how you describe, the last, couple months and so forth. Are you at a point where you're proud and you like yourself?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I've come a long way in terms of my thinking about my self-worth and just knowing like that I'm a good parent. I'm an effective father and a good partner to my wife. So, those things are things that I was always doubting and probably sabotaging because I doubted it. And nowadays I'm good. Like, I can say that with confidence. And I used to not think I was always, I think there's something in me that was always like, I was never good enough. I have to keep trying to do something or escape discomfort. And now I'm willing to put in the hard work and push through the discomfort. And I think that is something that was the biggest help to me in terms of just becoming a more responsible adult, human, parent, husband.
Yeah. Well, and the ripple effect of that, which is really beautiful, is just, and I'm making the assumption, but I think you're able to impact a lot more lives like that as well, because you're the closest you can be to whatever the best version of yourself is today. I mean, that evolves. And I think that's a nice link even into the skateboard project, right? And all of the initiatives going on there and how many kids, hopefully will have the opportunity to come together in a time where, it's a lot of heavy stuff happening in the world. There's a lot of really weird community stuff with online as well that, hey, let's just skate, and build some of those qualities and those skills that, to your point earlier, I mean, I feel them as well, that never leave you, right? It's so important.
Yeah, I think so. Well, we started the foundation over 20 years ago, but definitely have found our stride as of late in terms of how effective we can be even without huge funding. And if nothing else, that was my best way to give back to the skateboard community, because the skate park that I grew up riding at was my home away from home. It's where I found my sense of community, my sense of purpose, not just training, but really like it was it was where I belonged. And when I saw skateboarding start to kind of blow up in the early 2000s, there was such a serious lack of facilities that it was really concerning. And that's when I decided, like, maybe I can turn this tide and figure out how to provide more facilities, but more for underserved areas, and to make sure that the local skate kids are the ones helping the design process. Because I think that was a big disconnect in the early days of skate parks in the 2000s, where a city said, we're cool, we're hip, we're going to make a skate park. And then they would hire a sidewalk contractor and they would create something that was not even as fun as the local shopping mall parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah. If I want to respect your time, so I'm going to start wrapping up. I mean, we didn't even cover, there's definitely, I know your dad had a lot to do in your life about skateboarding and just the sport in general as well. So I want to loop him in a little bit in this last question. And it's just, if your dad was still around today, and let's say the three of us were wrapping up dinner, and that interesting but unusual ritual of having black coffee or having coffee after dinner came up, what would he be proud of in terms of seeing what you've done with your life? What would he tell me?
Well, he was such an advocate for skateboarding because he saw what it provided me and all my misfit friends, who a lot of them had troubled family lives, and they found skateboarding as their salvation. And he saw that the good qualities of skateboarding and what it brought to so many of my friends, that for him to see how far it's come, that I had any sort of influence on that, would be probably his proudest moment. I mean, I literally just gave a speech in an event recently where I was talking about him, and I jokingly said, if anyone here knows how to communicate with the dearly departed, please tell my dad that skateboarding is now in the Olympics, because that would make him proudest above all else. Besides, that I'm doing well and that I have success, that he knew that skateboarding was the Olympics, that would be definitely the highlight for him.
Well, Mr. Hawk, I mean, I wish we had another hour together. There's so much more to talk about, but I'm grateful for the time we did spend together. And it's a real privilege, a real honor to have this time with you. And I just want to thank you for the time, but thank you for, just staying. It's like you opened the conversation, just staying determined throughout the whole journey, because again, that the ripple effect of that has impacted not just myself, which it has, but so many people out in this world that either skate or don't skate. And I think that's something to be really proud of. So I hope you feel that and you leave with a full heart.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.